You won't believe what I'm about to tell you." She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She simply smiled and slowly, quietly, destroyed them. Lily never thought love could end like that. Not with anger, not with betrayal, but with the slow drip of control from a woman who called herself Mother. It all started with a patch of land. Just a few acres of dusty Wyoming soil that belonged to Isaac's mother, Magdala. They had no money, no savings. But they had dreams. Big ones. So when Magdala offered a piece of her land so they could build their first home, it felt like a blessing. Isaac was overjoyed. Lily, though hesitant, said yes. Because when you love someone, you trust them. Even when your gut whispers, "Be careful." They built a small, charming cabin right behind Magdala's main house. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Lily painted the walls herself. Isaac carved their initials into the back porch. Every sunrise felt like a promise. Every evening, like safety. But peace doesn't last long when the walls are paper thin and the one watching over you doesn't blink. Magdala was always there, not just near. There, walking in without knocking, rearranging furniture, leaving food Lily never asked for. Making little comments like, "Oh, Isaac likes his shirts folded this way, dear. You should try seasoning it better next time." At first, Lily smiled through it. She bit her tongue. She told herself, she means well, she's just helping. But help shouldn't suffocate. Love shouldn't feel like surveillance. And Isaac? He didn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to. "She's just being my mom," he'd say. "She gave us this land. Be grateful." So Lily stayed quiet. Until silence became resentment. Until every dinner was a test. Every morning, a battle. Magdala's voice echoed through their walls. Her opinions louder than their laughter. Her presence heavier than their bed. And slowly, Lily began to disappear. She stopped dancing in the kitchen, stopped leaving notes in Isaac's lunch, stopped smiling at the sunrise. Because how do you breathe when someone else decides how much air you're allowed? And Isaac? He started changing too. He came home quieter, colder. He'd ask Lily, "Why can't you just get along with her? Why do you make everything so hard?" As if the problem was her. As if the invasion, the control, the manipulation wasn't real. But it was real. And one evening, Lily heard it. She wasn't supposed to, but she did. Magdala and Isaac, talking in the kitchen. Low, voices, heavy words. "She's not right for you," Magdala said. "She's pulling you away from your family. You're losing yourself, son." And Isaac? He didn't defend her. He didn't say a word. That night, Lily didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling. Hands, gripping the blanket, heart cracking silently inside her chest. Because sometimes the end isn't loud. It doesn't come with a crash. It comes with silence. The kind that tells you, this love isn't enough anymore. She stayed a few more weeks, pretending, hoping, begging, not with words, but with kindness. But the house no longer felt like home, not when every choice she made was questioned. Not when her husband became a stranger, not when her mother-in-law became the ruler of her world. And so, she packed a single suitcase, left a note, and drove off. No fights, no drama, just one line, scrawled in shaky ink. "I loved you, but your mother never let me love you fully." She moved in with her cousin in Montana, started over, got a job at a bookstore, woke up without surveillance. And Isaac? He never called, never looked for her. Magdala's house remained quiet, but full of exactly what she wanted: control. Lily never saw him again. Not in person. Not even in photos. Montana was colder than she expected. Not just the wind, not just the snow, but the quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after heartbreak, after escape. Lily moved into a small guest room at her cousin Clara's farmhouse. It smelled like old books and cinnamon. And for the first time in months, she could breathe. Clara didn't ask too many questions. She just hugged her tight, handed her a cup of tea and said, "You're safe here." Lily got a job at a tiny bookstore downtown, the kind with creaky floors and regulars who still paid in cash. She spent her days sorting shelves, making coffee for strangers, and pretending her heart hadn't been torn in half. But at night, the memories came back. She remembered the way Isaac used to pull her close in bed, how he'd whisper silly things just to make her laugh, how they dreamed about children and road trips and growing old side by side. But those dreams were built on someone else's land, someone else's rules, someone else's silence. Magdala. Her name still made Lily's chest tighten. The woman was a master at smiling while cutting you down. She never raised her voice, never slammed a door, but she could walk into a room and make Lily feel small with a single glance. Like Lily was an intruder in her own marriage. Clara noticed the way Lily's hands trembled when she mentioned Isaac. She noticed the way Lily flinched at the sound of a phone ringing. One evening, Clara asked, "Do you ever think he'll come after you?" Lily stared out the window for a long time, then said softly, "No, because he already chose her." Back in Wyoming, Magdala kept the house just the way it was. Isaac stayed in the same bedroom, the same bed. He said it was temporary, that Lily would come back, that she just needed space. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Magdala said things like, "You did the right thing. She never truly understood you." Some women just don't know how to be wives. Isaac didn't argue anymore. He didn't smile much either. At work, he kept to himself. At home, he barely spoke. Because deep down, he knew. He knew he'd let Lily go without a fight. That when she needed him to stand up, he stayed quiet. But Magdala, she didn't regret a thing. She had her son back. Her house was calm again. No more candles that smelled like foreign spices. No more laughter that wasn't hers. To her, it was a victory. To Isaac, it was silence. To Lily, it was freedom. But at what cost? Months passed. Lily was good at pretending now. She smiled at customers. She even laughed at Clara's jokes. But deep down, she was grieving. Not just the loss of a marriage, but the loss of a self she once believed in. One rainy morning, a letter arrived. No name, no return address. Just her name. In handwriting she knew too well. Isaac. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Lily, I think about you every day. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I made you feel alone in our own home. I didn't see it then, but I do now. I don't expect you to come back. I just needed you to know you weren't wrong. You were never wrong. Isaac." She read it 3 times, then folded it, and placed it in the drawer beside her bed. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. Because words, no matter how kind, can't undo what silence allowed. And while Isaac wrestled with guilt, Magdala continued on, hosting dinners, volunteering at church, telling anyone who'd listen that her son's wife just wasn't ready for marriage. The truth never left her lips, not once. And Isaac? He was shrinking. Every day. He no longer fixed things around the house. He no longer played his guitar. He walked through life like a ghost of who he used to be. Until one night, he found an old photo in a drawer. Lily. Laughing. Sunlight in her hair, paint on her cheek. Back when they were building the cabin, before everything twisted. He held that photo for hours, and for the first time, he wept, not because she was gone, but because he had let her slip through his fingers, while holding on to the hand that pushed her away. Clara had a garden. It wasn't much, just a few rows of herbs, tomatoes, and wildflowers. But for Lily, it became a place to breathe. She started spending early mornings there, barefoot in the dirt, hands in the soil. Something about planting gave her peace. It didn't ask for anything, didn't judge, didn't invade. And in that garden, Lily began to find herself again. Not the wife, not the disappointment, just Lily. She started painting again, too. In the shed behind Clara's house, she set up a little corner with canvases, brushes she bought secondhand, and a speaker that played old folk songs. The world outside kept spinning, but in that little space, she was whole. Then one afternoon, Clara came into the shed holding her phone. "Lily," she said, "you might want to see this." It was a post from a woman in Wyoming, someone Clara barely knew but followed online. The photo was blurry, taken through a car window, but the house behind Magdala's, Lily's house, was in ruins. The porch had collapsed, the paint peeled away, windows shattered, and in bold text above the photo, "Abandoned dreams." Lily stared at it for a long time. Not because of the damage, but because she realized no one was living there anymore. She whispered, "Why would he let it rot like that?" Clara hesitated, then said softly, "Because maybe it hurts him to look at it." And just like that, the pressure returned. Not guilt, not regret, something else. That deep, aching question we all carry after heartbreak. Was any of it real? Meanwhile, in Wyoming, Isaac was unraveling. He had moved out of Magdala's house 3 weeks earlier, packed up with no announcement, no reason, just left the keys on the kitchen table. Magdala stood in the doorway that morning, wrapped in her robe, saying, "You're overreacting." She was never going to stay. But Isaac didn't say a word. He walked away, because somewhere deep inside, he realized what he'd become. Not a husband, not a son, not a man. Just a shadow cast by someone else's expectations. He rented a small cabin 10 miles out. No internet, no cable. Just trees, silence, and the ghost of Lily's laughter in the back of his mind. Some nights, he'd sit on the porch, reading her letter again and again. The one she left before she vanished. "I loved you, but your mother never let me love you fully." He memorized every line, not because it gave him peace, but because it reminded him of the cost of silence. He thought about driving to Montana, finding her, telling her everything she deserved to hear, not in a letter, not too late, face to face. But something always stopped him. What if she had already moved on? What if seeing him brought back the pain instead of the love? So instead, he stayed still and hoped maybe one day she'd come back. But Lily wasn't coming back. One evening, Clara came home from town holding a folded flyer. "Guess who's here?" she asked. Lily raised an eyebrow. Clara unfolded the paper. It was a flyer for a local art show. There, at the bottom corner, was a familiar name. Isaac Vance. Acoustic set, Saturday at 7 p.m. Lily froze. She stared at the paper like it might catch fire in her hands. She hadn't heard his name spoken out loud in nearly a year. "He's playing in this town?" she whispered. Clara nodded slowly. He must have seen the gallery call. It's open to anyone. Lily didn't sleep that night. She just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding with questions. Was he here for her? Did he know she lived in this town? Or was this the universe, throwing the past in her face? The next day, she walked past the cafe where the event would be. She saw the sign outside. She saw his name again. Her stomach turned. Part of her wanted to go, to stand in the back and watch him, see if his eyes searched the crowd for her, see if the music still carried her name. But another part, the part still healing, knew the danger. Old wounds, reopened in public places, don't always close again. But when Saturday came, she went, not to speak, not to cry, just to witness. The cafe was small, dim lights, a soft crowd. And then he walked in. Isaac, thinner, tired, older somehow, but still him. He didn't see her, not at first. He sat with his guitar, tuned the strings, closed his eyes, and began to play. The first song was soft, broken, like an apology, wrapped in melody. And then, halfway through the second song, he looked up and saw her, right there, back of the room, hands folded, eyes shining. Their eyes met. Everything stopped. But Lily didn't smile. She stood, turned, and walked away. Because love, when broken, doesn't always need a final word. Sometimes, the silence is the goodbye. Lily didn't stop walking until she reached the edge of town. The wind was cold that night. It stung her cheeks, tugged at her coat. But it grounded her, reminded her that this was real. Not a dream, not a flashback. She had seen him, Isaac, and he had seen her. But she hadn't turned back. She hadn't stayed, because the chapter was already closed, even if the ache still lived in her chest. She took the long road home, cutting through empty fields and side streets. The sound of his guitar still echoed in her memory, but the music no longer held her. It was haunting, yes, but it wasn't enough. When she got home, Clara was waiting on the porch. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She just handed Lily a cup of tea, sat beside her, and said, "Letting go doesn't always feel like freedom at first." Lily didn't reply. She just nodded. Tears quietly slid down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. They weren't tears of regret. Not exactly. They were. Grief. Grief for what almost was. For what should have been. In the days that followed, Lily withdrew a little. She worked shorter shifts at the bookstore, painted less, smiled less. It was as if seeing Isaac again had stirred up a layer of dust she thought she had already swept away. Clara gave her space. But one morning, she placed a journal on Lily's nightstand. Inside the front cover, it simply said, "Write what you never got to say." So Lily did. Each page spilled with quiet rage, with sorrow, with forgiveness, that came and went in waves. She wrote about the smell of their first winter in the cabin, the way Isaac used to trace circles on her back when she couldn't sleep, the night she overheard Magdala convincing him she was the problem. She wrote until her hands cramped, until her heart felt empty. And finally, she wrote a single sentence that stopped her breath. "You let her divorce us." That was the moment. Something shifted inside her. Not anger, not pain. Clarity. She had spent so much time wondering what she did wrong. So many nights replaying her tone, her words, her silences. But it was never about how loud she loved him. It was about how silent he was when it mattered most. And some silences are louder than screams. Back in his rented cabin outside of town, Isaac replayed that moment in the cafe over and over. The way her eyes found his. The way she stood, calm and certain, and and walked away. He didn't chase her. He couldn't. He knew, right then, it was over. Not because she stopped loving him, but because she had started loving herself more. And maybe that's the part Magdala never taught him. He called his mother that night, not out of love, not out of longing, out of need, to say something that had been sitting in his throat like stone. When she answered, cheerful as ever, he said, "You were right about one thing. Lily didn't belong to you, but I didn't either. And now, I belong to no one." He hung up before she could respond. He wouldn't speak to her again. Spring came slowly to Montana. The snow melted in soft patches. Trees stretched out their limbs again. And the garden, once frozen, quiet, began to bloom. So did Lily. Not all at once, not in dramatic ways, but in the quiet, honest work of rebuilding. She applied for a grant to open her own art studio, a space for women who had left toxic marriages, a place to paint, to cry, to start again. It was small at first, a renovated barn outside of town, but word spread fast. Soon, women from all over began showing up, some with children, some with nothing but a suitcase, all of them carrying stories that never quite fit inside their chests. Lily didn't offer therapy or advice. She just offered space, canvas, color. And in those rooms, surrounded by laughter and tears and brush strokes, she found purpose. She found peace. Clara watched it happen with quiet pride. "You're building something no one can take away," she said one evening. Lily smiled. "I'm not building it for anyone else," she replied. "Not this time." One day, months later, Lily received a small package in the mail. No note, no sender. Inside was a single photo. It was the old cabin, the one she and Isaac had built. The porch had been fixed, the windows cleaned, wildflowers planted out front. It was still standing, but it no longer looked like their house. It looked like a memory someone had finally let go of. Lily held the photo for a while, then placed it in a drawer, right beside Isaac's letter. She didn't cry, didn't smile, just whispered, "Thank you." Because closure doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it comes in silence that doesn't hurt anymore. Months later, at her studio's first gallery night, Lily stood by a canvas she had painted herself. It was abstract. Waves of blue and gold. One edge sharp and broken, the other smooth and rising. A woman approached her and asked, "What's it called?" Lily looked at the piece, tilted her head, and said softly, "Surviving love." Not because she was bitter, not because she was wounded, but because she finally understood. Some love stories aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to teach, to break, to rebuild. And in that breaking, she found herself. Not as Isaac's wife, not as Magdala's disappointment. Just Lily. And that was enough. Years later, Lily walked through her studio just after sunset. The lights were low. The walls were lined with color, with pain, with rebirth. At the back, a new painting rested on an easel. One she hadn't shown anyone yet. It was of a woman standing on a porch. A porch rebuilt, not remembered. She looked out at the mountains, alone but not lonely. Lily stood in front of it, smiled gently, and whispered to herself, "Some stories don't end in love. Some end in peace. And peace is a kind of love, too. And if this story moved you, or even made you think, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone. And this story is a work of fiction. All characters, names, and situations are entirely made up and are not based on real individuals. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental.